A billionaire thought he had seen it all: wealth, power, and control. But nothing could prepare him for the shocking sight that unfolded one quiet afternoon. Outside his mansion, his paralyzed daughter, who hadn't moved or smiled in years, was suddenly dancing in her wheelchair, and beside her the family's black driver, lost in the rhythm. The billionaire froze. Questions raced through his mind. How was this possible? Why him? And what secret was hidden in this moment that would change everything he thought he knew about life, love, and humanity? Richard Hale was a billionaire who lived in a towering glass mansion overlooking the city. To the world, he had it all: money, power, and prestige. But behind those gleaming walls lay a silence no amount of wealth could cure. His only daughter, Amelia, had been paralyzed since a tragic accident years earlier. Once full of laughter and dreams, she now sat in her wheelchair, staring blankly at the world, her spirit seemingly locked away with her body. Doctors, therapists, and specialists from around the globe had been flown in, each promising breakthroughs, but none succeeded. Richard buried himself in work, using his empire as a shield from the pain he couldn't escape at home. Though he provided Amelia with every luxury imaginable, he rarely spent time by her side, because seeing her reminded him of his own helplessness. Then there was Marcus, the family's black driver. To Richard, he was just another employee. Quiet, punctual, invisible. Marcus knew his place in a house where wealth often cast shadows over kindness. But unlike others, he noticed Amelia. He saw not just a paralyzed girl, but a soul still yearning for life, trapped in silence. Richard never paid attention to Marcus until the day he returned home early. As he stepped through the gates, he froze at a sight that defied everything he believed about his daughter's condition. Richard stood frozen at the sight before him. Amelia, his silent, unresponsive daughter, was moving. Her head tilted, with the rhythm of faint music spilling from Marcus's phone, her hands swaying gently in the air. Her lips curved into something he hadn't seen in years: a smile. And there was Marcus standing beside her, not as a servant but as a friend, dancing awkwardly yet joyfully, encouraging her every small movement as if each one was a miracle. For a man who believed money could buy anything, Richard suddenly felt powerless. He had hired the best neurologists in the world, yet none had managed to spark life back into Amelia's body. And now, in his absence, his driver, a man he had barely spoken more than a few words to, was achieving what no professional could. At first, suspicion clouded his mind. Was this some kind of trick? A staged act to manipulate his emotions? The old prejudices he kept buried began to rise. In his world of elites, Marcus was just an employee, a man of a different world and a different skin color. Could it really be him who awakened something in Amelia? Richard wanted to storm outside and demand answers, but something stopped him. Instead, he watched from the shadows. Day after day, Richard quietly observed. Marcus never noticed him. Every afternoon, when the house grew quiet, Marcus would wheel Amelia onto the garden patio, where the sunlight fell warm on her face. He played soft music, jazz, gospel, sometimes even children's songs, and he moved beside her. At first it was simple, tapping her fingers, guiding her hands to sway, laughing gently when her eyes flickered in recognition. Soon Amelia began responding, her lips twitching, her shoulders jerking ever so slightly as though her body was remembering how to be free. Richard's heart wrestled with emotions he didn't want to name: awe, fear, envy, and beneath it all, an uncomfortable truth. The connection his daughter shared with Marcus was something he had never been able to create. He told himself it was impossible. How could a driver succeed where he, with all his power, had failed? Then came the whispers. Other staff began to talk. Some said Marcus was overstepping boundaries, that a black driver had no business spending so much time with the billionaire's daughter. Richard's wealthy friends would never understand. They'd say it was inappropriate, dangerous even. The ugly voice of prejudice, the same voice Richard had long pretended didn't exist within him, crept louder. But one evening changed everything. Returning home earlier than usual, Richard found Amelia not just smiling but laughing, a sound that pierced the heavy silence of the mansion. Marcus was spinning clumsily beside her wheelchair, and Amelia's eyes shone with light, almost as if she were a child again. For the first time in years, Richard felt tears sting his eyes. Still, doubt gnawed at him. Was Marcus a miracle, or a threat to the world Richard had built around control, wealth, and appearances? The day of confrontation arrived when Richard's carefully constructed patience finally cracked. He came home earlier than expected, his mind already clouded with unease. The sound of music drifted through the marble halls of the mansion. Not the soft classical pieces Amelia's therapist used to play, but something different, soulful, alive and raw. His footsteps grew heavy as he followed the melody to the garden. There they were again. Amelia in her chair, body swaying more fluidly than ever before. Her laughter carried like fragile glass in the evening air. Marcus was beside her, not just playing music but moving with a passion that seemed to pour his entire spirit into her world. He clapped his hands, stepped back, and Amelia raised her trembling arm higher than Richard had ever seen. She was dancing. Something inside Richard erupted. He stormed forward, his voice breaking through the laughter like thunder. The music stopped. Amelia froze. Marcus turned, startled, his face shifting from joy to alarm in a heartbeat. "What is this?" Richard demanded, his voice trembling with anger and something he refused to name. Fear. "What are you doing with my daughter?" Marcus's hands shook as he lowered the phone, but his eyes held steady. "I'm just helping her live again, sir." "Helping?" Richard spat the word, his chest heaving. "You're a driver. You're not a doctor. You're not qualified. You think you can just fix what the world's best couldn't?" His tone carried the weight of years of buried prejudice, of social barriers he'd never questioned until now. Marcus didn't flinch. He looked at Amelia, who stared back at him with pleading eyes, then turned to Richard. "I don't claim to heal her. I only give her what money and medicine never could, joy. She laughs because she feels seen. She moves because she feels free. And she smiles because someone believes she still can." Richard's throat tightened, his fists curled, but the truth hung heavy in the silence. He saw it, the light in Amelia's eyes, the undeniable spark of life. He had long convinced himself she was lost, unreachable, locked away forever. Yet here she was, reaching back not for him but for Marcus, the very man he had dismissed as invisible. The weight of the moment crushed him. For the first time, Richard questioned not Marcus, but himself. Was his anger rooted in fear of losing, control, or in the bitter truth that the love he had withheld from Amelia was being given to her by the one person he had underestimated most? The garden fell silent after Marcus's words, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. Richard stood there, his face shadowed by years of pride, grief, and denial. Yet beneath it all was something even heavier. Shame. For the first time, he realized that the walls he had built around himself and Amelia weren't made of glass and steel. They were built from fear. Marcus stepped back respectfully, lowering his gaze as though bracing for dismissal. He knew his place in the Hale household, or at least the place Richard had always kept him in. But Amelia's trembling hand rose slightly, reaching toward Marcus with effort. Her eyes glistened, silently pleading for the bond she had discovered not to be broken. It was more than movement. It was choice. Richard's chest tightened. He thought of all the years wasted hiring specialists who spoke in clinical terms but never looked at Amelia as a little girl who still longed to laugh. He thought of the countless times he had avoided her room because the sight of her pain mirrored his own failures as a father. And now, in front of him, the daughter he had nearly given up on was alive with joy, and it wasn't because of his money or his power. It was because of Marcus, the man he had barely acknowledged, the man society would have dismissed without a second thought. In that moment, Richard had a choice. He could cling to his pride, cast Marcus out, and continue living. In a world where appearances mattered more than humanity, or he could let go. He could open his heart, not just to Amelia's laughter, but to the uncomfortable truth that love and healing often come from the places we least expect. With a deep breath, Richard lowered himself beside his daughter's wheelchair. His hand, trembling, reached for hers. Amelia looked at him, her smile softening into something pure, acceptance. Then, for the first time in years, she leaned her head against his shoulder. Richard felt his tears break free, and in that fragile embrace he realized that his wealth had never been his greatest fortune. His daughter's laughter was. Marcus watched silently, unsure of his fate. But Richard finally turned to him, not as an employer to an employee, not as a billionaire to a driver, but as one father to another, human being. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice raw. 2 words, but heavier than gold. From that day forward, the mansion changed. Marcus was no longer invisible. He became part of Amelia's world, and slowly, Richard's. Together, they created moments that money could never buy. Evenings filled with music, days filled with sunlight, and nights filled with laughter that echoed through the once silent halls. And as for Richard, he learned a lesson he would never forget, that racism, prejudice, and pride are walls that blind us from seeing the humanity in others. Sometimes the miracle we've been waiting for comes not through wealth or status, but through love shared across those very walls.